Pope Leo XIV placed one hand on the yacht's gangway and ordered the engines shut down. The white vessel was due to leave in 11 minutes. Its decks were crowded with donors holding crystal glasses beneath a banner that read, "A new era of compassion at sea." But an elderly woman in a faded blue coat stood outside the security rope. A guard had just returned a small brass bell to her as though it were something dangerous. Cardinal Vittorio Belandi watched from the upper deck. Behind him, the Stella Regina gleamed under the harbor lights. Through its open salon doors, the Pope could see white leather chairs, a piano, and a wall of wine bottles. The woman's name was Eleanor Hayes. She was 79 and had spent most of her life nursing fishermen and caring for widows along the coast. Her shoes were wet from the pier, and one button was missing from her coat. "I am sorry," she told the guard. "I only wanted to put it back before the boat left." Pope Leo XIV heard her. He walked toward the rope and lowered himself to examine the bell. Around its rim were the words, "Mercy of the Sea." Beneath them were two small initials, A.B. "Where did this come from?" he asked. Eleanor looked toward the yacht. "From her." Cardinal Belandi descended the gangway before she could say more. "Holy Father, Mrs. Hayes is confused about the ownership of certain objects. The bell belonged to an older vessel. This yacht is a separate asset." Eleanor shook her head. "No, Your Eminence. The hull is the same." The departure horn sounded. A crewman checked his watch. Beyond the breakwater, dark clouds were moving over the water. Belandi spoke gently, as though protecting Eleanor from embarrassment. The vessel was extensively rebuilt. The Foundation uses it to maintain relationships with donors who support our charitable work. "What work is it doing tonight?" the Pope asked. "This is a donor voyage." "And tomorrow?" "A private meeting." "And after that?" "The schedule is managed by the Foundation." Pope Leo XIV turned to the captain. "Who gave the order to leave?" The captain looked at the Cardinal. That answer was enough. "No one leaves this harbor," the Pope said. The music stopped. A waiter lowered a tray. One donor quietly hid his glass behind a flower arrangement. Belandi stepped closer. "The contracts are signed. Delaying departure could expose the Church to considerable liability." The Pope took the bell from Eleanor and held it between them. "Then we will begin with the liability no one signed." He requested the registration papers, the Foundation accounts, the passenger list, and the keys to every locked room aboard. Belandi's face remained composed. "The vessel is not Vatican property." "No," the Pope said. "It appears to belong to people who were never invited aboard." The guests were escorted ashore. The crew remained. The engines went silent. The yacht had been seized pending review. But as Pope Leo XIV stepped onto the gangway, Eleanor caught his sleeve. "If you open the room below the chapel," she whispered, "do not let them remove the wall first." The Pope looked at her. "What is behind it?" Eleanor tightened her hands around the bell. That is what he is afraid you will see. Cardinal Belandi had built his reputation on discipline. He answered letters before sunrise, remembered the names of wealthy families, and could explain a budget without looking at a page. People trusted him because he never appeared surprised. Even as Pope Leo XIV entered the yacht's lower corridor with 2 auditors and the captain, Belandi spoke like a man correcting a misunderstanding. The room beneath the chapel was removed during renovation. There is nothing behind that wall except old plumbing. The chapel was smaller than the wine room upstairs. 4 chairs faced a narrow altar. A gold cross hung above a marble panel. The Pope knocked on the panel. The sound was hollow. Older plans showed what the current plans did not. 6 medical beds, oxygen cabinets, an examination table, and a refrigerator for insulin. The entrance had been sealed during renovation. The space behind it had become storage for wine and luggage. Belandi did not deny it. The equipment was outdated. The space was no longer efficient. What replaced the service? The Pope asked. We support clinics on land. How many? An auditor answered from the files. 2 clinics received grants last year. 9 requests were declined. And how many donor voyages? The captain removed his cap. 14. The silence that followed was not dramatic. It was administrative. Belandi adjusted his cuff. Relationships produce resources. Resources produce mercy. The yacht is a tool. His explanation almost sounded reasonable. A private dinner could lead to a donation. A comfortable voyage could persuade a rich guest to fund a clinic. Assets must serve the mission strategically, he said. Pope Leo XIV looked at the sealed medical bay. Then, show me the mission. 3 binders were brought aboard. 1 contained banquet photographs. Another contained donor pledges. The 3rd contained requests from island clinics. Most had the same red word stamped across the top. Deferred. A clinic needed a generator. An old man needed heart medicine. A nurse needed fuel to reach patients during winter. The amounts were smaller than the cost of 1 evening's flowers on the yacht. Not every request can be honored, Belandi said. No, the Pope replied. But someone decided which people could wait. The Cardinal's voice hardened. Sentiment cannot govern the Church. Eleanor flinched. The Pope noticed. He pointed to the initials on the bell. A.B. Who was she? My mother, Belandi said. Adele Belandi helped establish the original charity. What did she intend this vessel to be? A service ship. What kind of service? The captain answered. Medical relief. Belandi turned on him. The original model was financially unsustainable. The captain, Marco Salvi, had worked aboard for 17 years. Until then, he had answered every question with 1 word. It became unsustainable after the clinic routes were cancelled, he said. Who cancelled them? The Pope asked. No one needed to answer. Eleanor said the original route records had been kept inside the medical bay. Adele wanted every crew to see the names of those waiting on the islands. The marble panel had not been installed to improve the chapel. It had been installed to hide the door. Pope Leo XIV asked for tools. Belandi took a breath. "I strongly advise against damaging the vessel before the ownership review is complete." The Pope turned toward him. "Who owns the wall?" No one spoke. "Then the people behind it may." When the marble came loose, dust fell across the chapel floor. Behind it was a steel door with faded green paint. A strip of white cloth had been tied around the handle. Eleanor recognized it. It had once been part of Adele Belandi's nurse's apron. The door was locked. The captain said the key had disappeared years ago. Eleanor unscrewed the wooden handle of the brass bell. A small iron key slid into her palm. For 17 years, she had carried it there. She placed it in Pope Leo XIV's hand. When the door opened, the room did not reveal stolen gold or hidden money. It revealed what the yacht had failed to do. The medical bay smelled of dust, metal, and old antiseptic. 6 narrow beds remained bolted to the floor. The oxygen cabinet was empty. The medicine refrigerator had been unplugged, but a child's drawing was still held to its door by a rusted magnet. It showed a white boat under a yellow sun. Across the top, in uneven letters, someone had written, "Thank you for bringing Grandma home." On the far wall were hundreds of names. Beside each name was an island, a condition, and the date of the last visit. Some names had crosses beside them. Others simply stopped. Eleanor would not enter until the Pope invited her. For 12 years, she had served there as a nurse. Her husband, Thomas, maintained the engines. He later died during a rescue after staying below deck to keep the pumps running long enough for 3 patients to be transferred. Eleanor did not ask for sympathy. She straightened a blanket on the nearest bed. "He hated being called brave," she said. He said, "Brave men come home." The Pope looked at the bell. Was it his? No. It was hers. Adele Belandi had rung it whenever the ship approached an island. 1 ring meant medicine had arrived. 2 meant a doctor was aboard. 3 meant the ship would carry someone to the mainland. Eleanor still polished it every Sunday because Adele had asked her never to let the salt destroy it. If Eleanor's quiet loyalty brings to mind someone who served for years and was later forgotten, write their name in the comments and let that service be remembered. Captain Marco opened the drawers. He found cancelled route charts and medical requests tied with twine. The newest was less than a month old. It came from St. Gabriel Island. The small clinic had lost part of its roof in a storm. Its generator was failing. 12 elderly residents depended on refrigerated medicine. 1 woman required oxygen through the night. The Foundation had stamped the request deferred. A second paper was clipped behind it. That same week, the yacht had purchased new dining chairs. The chairs had cost nearly 9 times more than the generator repair. Belandi looked at the figures. The yacht was preparing for a donor summit. Did the summit pay for the generator? The Pope asked. The pledges are still being processed. How long can oxygen wait for processing? The captain checked the weather radio. A storm had shifted south. By midnight, the channel to St. Gabriel would be unsafe. After that, no large vessel could reach the island until the weather cleared. The clinic had enough oxygen for one night. The clock had changed. The yacht was no longer 11 minutes from a banquet voyage. It was 6 hours from losing the chance to reach people who had already been told to wait. Belandi said the vessel was no longer equipped for medical transport. Eleanor pulled the cover from one bed. The frame was intact. Marco opened a panel. The old oxygen line still ran through the wall. An engineer tested the emergency generator. It started on the second attempt. The ship had not forgotten what it was built to do. Only the people in charge had. Pope Leo XIV asked about Adele. She had been a young widow with a son and a fear of deep water. Her husband died after suffering a heart attack on a fishing boat. No doctor reached him in time. She spent the rest of her life shortening the distance between illness and mercy. That son was Vittorio Belandi. As a young priest, he sailed beside her. He carried medicine boxes, slept on the floor when every bed was occupied, and once preached on St. Gabriel that no Christian institution had the right to call a person too distant to save. Then the charity grew. The offices became larger. The donors became richer. The vessel became a symbol. Belandi began believing that protecting the symbol was the same as protecting the mission. After Adele died, the medical routes were reduced, then suspended, then erased from the brochures. Behind one bed, the Pope found an old photograph. A young Father Belandi stood beside his mother. Eleanor and Thomas were behind them. Between them hung the brass bell. The Cardinal would not look at it. "What happened to the child who made this drawing?" the Pope asked. Eleanor touched the rusted magnet. Her grandmother lived on St. Gabriel. The ship brought her home after surgery. And the child? She runs the clinic now. The woman who had sent the latest request for oxygen was the same child who had drawn the picture. Belandi sat on the edge of an old bed. For the first time that evening, he looked his age. But Pope Leo XIV did not confuse pain with repentance. He placed the request in the Cardinal's hand. "Your mother built a road across the water," he said. "You turned it into a dining room. The vessel cannot sail into a storm because of one request," Belandi answered. The captain checked the radio again. "We can clear the channel if we leave within 90 minutes. "And if something goes wrong?" Belandi asked. The Pope looked at the wall of names. "Something already has." He turned to the crew. "Empty the wine storage. Restore the medical bay. Load the generator, oxygen, medicine, blankets, and food." Then he looked at Belandi. "You will come with us. I am not a sailor." "No," the Pope said. "Tonight you will learn what the sailors were carrying for you." Cases of wine came off the yacht. Oxygen cylinders went aboard. The dining tables were covered with medicine boxes. The salon became a sleeping area. The luggage room became oxygen storage. The wine compartment became a medical refrigerator. The sealed bay was cleaned and lit for the first time in 17 years. Eleanor tied Adele's strip of white cloth back around the door handle. Workers began removing the gold letters, spelling Stella Regina. Beneath them, faint but visible on the original hull, was another name: Mercy of the Sea. Belandi watched the older letters emerge. Assets must serve the mission strategically, he said again, but the phrase no longer sounded clean. Pope Leo XIV pointed toward the oxygen. This is the mission. Then he asked one question. When your mother rang that bell, did she ask who could afford to hear it? Belandi opened his mouth. No answer came. Eleanor stood nearby, holding the bell. The Cardinal turned to her. You should have brought this to me sooner. I came 7 times. The words were so quiet that the crew stopped moving. 7 visits had been reduced to appointment notes, then unanswered calls, then a warning that Eleanor was becoming disruptive. She had not been refused because the facts were unclear. She had been refused because her memory was inconvenient. Pope Leo XIV handed Belandi a box of insulin. Carry this aboard. The Cardinal did. Then another box. Then a crate of water. He carried each one in view of the crew, harbor workers, and the widows gathered behind the barrier. There was no applause. Public correction did not need celebration. It needed witnesses. The Mercy of the Sea left harbor 43 minutes before the channel was expected to close. The first hour was calm. The second was not. Rain struck the windows. The yacht rolled against waves it had never faced during donor cruises. One of the new dining chairs broke loose and slid across the salon. Below deck, Eleanor checked oxygen valves with the same movements she had used years before. Belandi entered, carrying blankets. He noticed a small notch cut into the wall beside one bed. My height, he said. Eleanor nodded. Your mother marked it the first summer you sailed. Under the notch, in faded pencil, were the words, Vittorio, age 12. The vessel had not become personal because the Pope seized it. It had always been personal. My mother believed every problem could be solved by going toward it, Belandi said. She believed distance was a decision, Eleanor replied. Near midnight, the island lights vanished behind rain. Then one weak yellow light returned. The clinic. The yacht sounded its horn. No one answered from shore. Eleanor climbed to the upper deck with the brass bell. Her hand shook in the wind. She rang once. The sound was small against the storm, but a second light appeared. Then another. People remembered. She rang twice. A truck's headlights came on near the clinic. Before the third signal, Pope Leo XIV called Belandi forward. The Cardinal stood beside the bell, rain running down his face. Eleanor offered him the rope. He did not take it. I do not have the right. The Pope placed Eleanor's hand over his. Then do not ring it alone. Together, they rang the third signal. The harbor gate opened. The yacht docked 7 minutes before the eastern pier became unusable. The first person waiting was Dr. Grace Nolan, the woman who had made the drawing as a child. She now wore rubber boots and an old red jacket. She recognized Eleanor before she recognized the Pope. "You came back," she said. Eleanor watched the medical crates move ashore. The boat did. The clinic's generator failed while the replacement was still being unloaded. For 3 minutes, the building went dark. Crewmen carried oxygen through the rain. The chef held a flashlight. Marco and 2 islanders dragged the new generator into place. Belandi followed Eleanor into a small room where 84-year-old Margaret Cole lay beneath 2 blankets, breathing from the final oxygen cylinder. On the table beside her was a photograph of Adele Belandi. Margaret opened her eyes. "You have her hands," she whispered. Belandi looked down at his fingers. Then he knelt beside the bed. The replacement oxygen arrived. The lights returned. The medicine refrigerator started again. Soup was carried into the waiting room where elderly residents sat in coats beneath a leaking roof. Pope Leo XIV did not give a speech. He moved a chair beside Margaret's bed and told Belandi to sit there until her breathing settled. By morning, the storm had passed. The people of St. Gabriel gathered on the pier. Some remembered the old medical ship. Others knew it only from stories. They touched the faded letters on the hull as though greeting someone who had been missing. Pope Leo XIV announced that the vessel would never again be used for private entertainment. Its luxury furnishings would be sold. The money would repair the clinic and restore the medical routes Adele had created. A civilian medical board would control the schedule. Island residents would hold seats on it. No donor voyage could be approved until fuel and medicine for the relief routes were secured. Belandi would no longer control the foundation. For 1 year, he would assist the coastal clinics whose requests had been deferred. He would handle no money and approve no contracts. He would carry what others had carried while he spoke about strategy. Belandi did not protest. He removed the polished Cardinal's crest from the yacht with his own hands. Behind it was a small bronze plate. Only Eleanor had known it was there. It carried Adele Belandi's final instruction: no island too small. No life too late. Belandi read it once. Then he sat on a supply crate and covered his face. Eleanor allowed him to feel the distance between the boy marked on the medical wall and the man who had sealed it shut. Only then did she place the brass bell beside him. "Your mother did not ask you to be ashamed forever," she said. "She asked you to come back." 6 months later, the Mercy of the Sea approached St. Gabriel beneath a clear morning sky. The wine racks were gone. The medical bay was open. A red cross had been painted beside the old name. Eleanor stood at the bow in the same blue coat, now with 2 matching buttons. Beside her, Cardinal Belandi carried a case of medicine. He no longer waited for cameras before lifting it. As the island appeared, Eleanor handed him the brass bell. This time he did not say he lacked the right. He placed one hand over hers. Together they rang once for medicine, twice for the doctor, and 3 times for anyone who was finally coming home.